We're having a day like any other day, responding to our medical calls and transporting, a few people here or there.
I was there as a spectator, standing in the middle of the venue.
We were front left of the crowd.
We're sitting in the truck, I was in the driver's seat, and my partner was just right next to me.
Everybody heard a noise. For me, it was a crackle. For me, it was, when I was little, I grew up in Southern California where power lines ran through your backyard. So that's what it sounded like, just kind of sounded like a crackle.
You heard the first volley and you're like, what is that? Like, didn't sound right.
Everybody kind of looked around, even the officers that we were next to.
And the second one went off and I turned around and looked at my person I was with and I was like, that's not right.
And it kept happening and it got louder. And it seemed to last a little bit longer, that noise. We knew it wasn't, for me, I knew it wasn't pyrotechnics because part of the briefing that we had all gone through was that no artist on Sunday night would have any pyrotechnics. So I certainly knew it wasn't that. And then it was seeing the reaction of those officers at that point. There's a little pony wall that divided the sidewalk from the boulevard, and they took cover.
We just got down with everyone else.
And I think for a split second, I'm the guy looking around, like, oh, wait, okay, I better duck, I better get behind that wall.
And then people started running at us. And I remember we ran back to a corner where the bleachers and stuff were at and realized we couldn't get out there. Like it was all closed off with fencing.
Quickly realized that it was gunfire just by the reaction of the police.
So he took down the fence and I went to step through and my boot got stuck.
I made the decision to run back into the venue.
You could hear the bullets just banging off metal, hitting things around you. And I was like, okay, stay calm, get your boot out. And I couldn't get my foot out of my boot because it was too tight. So I was sitting there fighting with the fence until I pulled enough to get my boot out.
Immediately, as I'm running back into the venue, more shots were fired. That's when I decided to duck behind what was a bar and landed on top of several people that were there taking cover. And that's when I got on the radio and advised our dispatch center that, hey, we have an active shooter.
And we heard on the radio a call go out. We heard Glenn call out on the radio, dispatch, Ops 5, we have an active shooter. And I don't know if it is or isn't. I haven't really heard the recording since, but I remember hearing gunshots in the background of the radio. Maybe that's just my brain putting it all together, but I remember my heart sank because I knew based on the sound of his voice, at the very least, that it was real.
We went back to the medical tent.
It was just pure chaos. It was a small tent and a lot of people, a lot of emotions.
There were, people more or less lined up. There were people being carried over. There were people being, that had passed away that were being taken out of the tent and placed to the side so we can make room for those that were alive. I knew the team at that moment had switched into that. This is what we trained to do. This is what we talk about.
I don't remember hearing the gun firing stop. I don't remember I remember the first girl that walked in the door and she had a bullet hole through her arm and just blood dumping out, and threw a tourniquet on her and they just started coming and coming and coming. And I remember some people's faces from inside there.
They lost contact with family members, they lost contact with friends, they lost belongings, and so it took a long time to just try and find where everybody was located and find where all their stuff was if we could find it.
It was tearing sheets, it was holding IV bags because we didn't have IV poles, it was talking to the patients and reassuring them that they were okay.
Nobody froze, nobody stood back, nobody watched. Everybody was constantly just moving and doing things. All the while, shots are still being fired.
Some of the things that were hard for me were the faces that I saw when I was running to the medical tent. And the injuries you saw the severity of it when you stood up and tried to escape.
felt like hundreds of patients on the right and left side of the street.
We got down, we were almost to the venue when we got flagged down by some people in a minivan and just stopped us in the middle of the road. And
we just couldn't make it more than a few feet before having people swarm our ambulance.
We hopped out and I climbed in the back of the minivan. There's a woman there who had gotten shot right in the middle of her forehead.
It was still, to this day, it's still a little uneasy remembering all of the people that we saw there, and unfortunately we couldn't take everyone.
Our EMT pulled the gurney out. The fire department just happened to pull up right behind us. We loaded her up.
Crews that were on shift that day and the patrons that were there did a wonderful job of kind of mass transporting people. You know, with a lot of our crews that first got there, transporting 10, 12 people in an ambulance.
Like, these patients are all extremely critical. Typically speaking, these are the type of patients you only transport one at a time, but that day wasn't your typical day.
Started driving down to the hospital. We got down to the hospital, it was pure chaos. I do remember somebody rolling a gurney by, the young gentleman laying on it, and I remember my eyes locked with his, except you could see, when you do this job long enough, you know, but when my eyes locked with his, you could see he was dead. There was no soul. And that sticks with me, for sure. His face definitely does. Just, there's something about that connection.
It's like one of those things that you don't think is ever gonna happen. You hear about it other places and, you know, definitely didn't expect it to happen here.
I never thought I would die that night, but I definitely thought I was gonna get hit by a bullet.
All the people, I knew all the people that were in the tent that day, and I couldn't leave them. Someone just told me I needed to stay. I needed to help them. I needed to make sure that our people were good and we could take care of these people. And I said, and that's why I chose to stay.
I know it's kind of a hard night for a lot of people in the EMS to talk about, but I know that they still were thankful that they were there and able to help.
When I got over to the medical tent, I called my father. And it wasn't till the end of the night that I got to see my dad. And I just remember seeing him in the parking lot across the street and running in his arms.
I don't hire you to say that you need to stand toe-to-toe with a guy into a gunfight with nothing but your pair of scissors. But they did do that. I mean, that's what's impressive, is they did stay their ground, and they did stay in the event, and they did help people.
What I was able to play witness to that night, to be able to see just concert goers that they didn't care about their own safety, they just cared about the person next to them. To see team members of ours that they were there enjoying the concert. They weren't there working. They were in zero working capacity.
There's a lot of emotions that tug at you. Did I perform well? Was I as brave as I felt I should have been? And there's a lot of thoughts that go through your mind, especially if you're being actively shot at or you're in a bad situation.
My head was from like 2 feet away from a big metal grill. And I was listening to bullets ping off this thing. And I'm like, how did I never get hit? Like, you sit there and you think about it, like, why? Like, what was the difference? Why did nothing happen to me that night? Was I supposed to be there because I was supposed to take care of all those people? Help take care of my team, make sure everybody was good? Like, you sit and you ask that question. Even 5 years later, I still ask, why?
I just remember, you know, how everybody came together, how we did the best we could with what we had and with the information that we had. I try to remind myself of the positives that came, the few positives that came out of that, and trying to avoid all the negatives and all the sadness.
It wasn't an easy thing to deal with at first. Like, I try to do everything like I normally do, just stuff it down, it'll go away type of deal thing, and then you realize it starts to eat at you.
The ones who were kind of being tough at the beginning, no, I'm all right. After about the third night of not sleeping, then they were able to take advantage of the counselors that we had here and get that further help that they needed, because we just wouldn't let them go. They need to stay until they got that appropriate care.
Therapy's a great thing. I talk to somebody on a very regular basis, and I've learned that talking about the experience itself has made it easier.
between like community gardens and food drives and blood drives, like it really just kind of showed the community that Vegas is, you know, how close they can come together in times of need, and something that I think we haven't seen before.
This community came together, and I lived in Vegas my entire life. I was born and raised here. And in that time, we weren't just a city, we were a community. And I will never forget the way the community came together to support each other, to support us as first responders, to support those who were injured, the families. And I'll never forget the true meaning of Vegas Strong.
Still that common thread, there's still that community element. There's still that, you know, I tell everyone, as cliche as it sounds, like there's a reason we're called Community Ambulance, and it's to be able to serve our community, and our community they continue to give back. I think for me that night it really opened my eyes, and it put that stamp on, I want to help people. That's why I'm here on earth, is to help people. I'm in a position in my life where I have the ability to help people when they're at the lowest of their lows, when they're at the darkest of their darkest moments. At the end of everything that we do, there's a human, there's a person, and it's our job to help them.
These are the kind of people that work for us. These are the people that will dedicate and put their life on the line for other people to help them out. That's what makes me proud. That's just who they are. That's not something we instilled in them. That's not something that we taught them. That's just who these people are. I couldn't be more proud of them.